The amber-violet clouds of Kale-7 swirled beneath the transport shuttle like toxic cotton candy. Elena Navarro pressed her hand against the viewport, feeling the cold seep through despite the vessel's thermal regulations. From this height, the planet looked almost beautiful, deceptively so. The stratospheric light show masked a surface where temperatures plummeted below 200 degrees Celsius during the infamous Evans-Long night, a 500-hour darkness that had already begun its slow descent across the hemisphere. "Final preparations for atmospheric entry," announced the shuttle's AI. "All cadets secure equipment and verify survival gear integrity." Around Elena, a dozen non-human cadets from the Galactic Academy checked elaborate exoskeletons, self-assembling habitat pods, and thermal regulation cores. Their gear hummed with cutting-edge technology, quantum heating filaments, atmospheric processors, and emergency beacons that could penetrate magnetic storms. Elena glanced down at her own equipment: an analog survival suit with manual zippers and clasps, a backpack containing mechanical tools, hand-cranked generators, reflective blankets, and other distinctly low-tech gear. While the alien cadets' suits glowed with activity indicators and status displays, hers bore only the faded Galactic Academy insignia and a small patch with her name and planet of origin: Earth. "Human," a voice chittered from her left, one of the Euro twins, insectoid cadets with segmented exoskeletons and multiple appendages. "Your equipment appears primitive. Faculty oversight?" "Intentional," Elena replied, tugging at a strap to secure her pack. "Analog redundancy." The Euro twins' compound eyes flashed with what Elena interpreted as amusement. "Redundancy implies backup. This is your primary system." The insectoid gestured with one of its smaller limbs toward the gleaming thermal core embedded in its thorax. "Our primary systems are designed to withstand Kale-7's conditions. No primitive backup necessary." The shuttle lurched suddenly as it hit the upper atmosphere, momentarily silencing the conversation. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "Entering Kale-7 atmosphere. Magnetic field readings stronger than projected. All electronic systems on isolation protocols." Elena felt her stomach tighten. The briefings had mentioned magnetic anomalies, but the strain in the pilot's voice suggested something beyond standard parameters. She tightened her straps and ran a mental checklist of her equipment. Not a single component relied on complex electronics. "Deployment in 10 minutes, the AI announced. "Survival training begins upon landing. Rendezvous coordinates transmitted to your navigational systems." The Euro twin turned to Elena again. "How will you navigate without—" The words died as the cabin lights flickered violently. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by the acrid smell of burning circuitry. All around the cabin, the cadets' high-tech equipment began to malfunction, displays flashing erratically, thermal cores pulsing with unstable energy. "Magnetic surge," the pilot shouted. "Systems failing. Prepare for emergency deployment." Elena watched in horror as the cadet across from her, a glass-skinned humanoid named M, screamed as her thermal core overheated, the skin around it blistering from contact. One by one, the sophisticated survival systems of each non-human cadet failed catastrophically. The Euro twins' exoskeletons locked up, freezing them in awkward positions. A serpentine cadet named Kira thrashed as her atmospheric processor sputtered and died. The shuttle doors slammed open automatically, the emergency protocol triggering despite the system's failure. Beyond lay the twilight landscape of Kale-7, a wasteland of ice and volcanic rock, the horizon already darkening as the long night approached. "Jump!" ordered the pilot. "Survival training commences now. Good luck, cadets." Elena was the first to move, her analog equipment unaffected by the magnetic disturbance. She leapt into the bitter cold of Kale-7, her mechanical altimeter spinning wildly as she descended. Behind her, She heard the panicked shouts of her fellow cadets as they struggled with their malfunctioning gear. The landing was rough, the impact partially absorbed by her manual shock absorbers. Elena rolled across frozen ground, coming to a stop against a jagged rock formation. Rising to her feet, she quickly assessed her surroundings. The shuttle was already disappearing into the violet-tinged clouds above, leaving them to their training or their deaths. One by one, the other cadets crashed down around her, their landings far less controlled. The Euro twins hit the ground in a tangle of locked limbs. M landed with a crunch that suggested broken bones. Kira's serpentine body coiled protectively. But even from a distance, Elena could see the creature shivering violently in the cold. Only Verkan, a reptilian cadet from an ice planet, seemed relatively composed, though his thermal armor flickered erratically, the power core clearly damaged. "What happened?" M gasped, her glass skin already frosting over at the edges. "All systems failed simultaneously." "Magnetic storm," Verkan replied, his voice a low hiss. "Stronger than the briefings indicated. All electronic systems compromised." Elena pulled out her manual thermometer. The mercury had already dropped below the lowest calibrated mark. "Temperature approximately 210 degrees Celsius and falling," she announced. "We need shelter immediately." The Euro twins had managed to deploy their habitat pod, but without power. It was merely a collapsed shell of polymer fabric. "Our thermal cores are inoperative," one of them chittered frantically. "We cannot survive these temperatures for more than 30 minutes. Elena scanned the horizon, looking for any natural formation that might offer protection. About 2 kilometers east, a series of volcanic rock formations jutted from the ice. "There," she pointed. "Those rocks might provide shelter from the wind at least." "How can you be so calm?" Em asked, her crystalline voice cracking with stress and cold. "Your equipment is even more primitive than ours." "Because my equipment doesn't rely on electronics," Elena replied, already starting toward the rock formation. "Nothing to fail in a magnetic storm." The group struggled across the icy terrain, the non-human cadets hampered by their malfunctioning gear. Elena found herself taking the lead, using a mechanical compass and the fading light to navigate. Behind her, Verkan helped the Euro twins, while Kira slithered painfully, her cold-blooded physiology already failing in the extreme temperatures. M trudged alongside Elena, her glass skin becoming increasingly opaque with frost. "I don't understand," she said between labored breaths. "The Academy equipped us with the most advanced survival technology in the galaxy. How could it all fail so completely?" "Technology has limits," Elena replied. "My people learned that the hard way, centuries ago. That's why I chose analog equipment. No complex circuits to disrupt, no power cores to fail." They reached the rock formations, just as the last light began to fade from the sky. The temperature had dropped another 20 degrees, and even Elena, with her thermal layers and chemical heat packs, could feel the deadly cold seeping into her bones. The formation created a natural windbreak, with a shallow cave-like depression that offered minimal shelter. Elena directed the cadets inside, noting with growing concern that several of them were showing signs of severe hypothermia, or whatever the equivalent was for their species. "We need heat," Verkan said, his reptilian metabolism slowing dangerously. "Without it, none of us will survive the night." Elena nodded, unpacking her supplies methodically. She laid out reflective blankets across the cave floor and walls, creating a makeshift insulation layer. From her pack, she retrieved a hand-cranked spark generator, a simple device that converted mechanical energy into a concentrated spark. "What is that primitive thing supposed to do?" Em asked, her voice weak. "Generate enough heat for all of us?" "No," Elena admitted, "but it might help us find something that will—" While the other cadets huddled together for warmth, Elena ventured deeper into the cave, examining the rock walls with a manual flashlight. The formation, appeared to be of volcanic origin, with veins of various minerals running through the dark stone. But what caught her attention were the unusual ice formations growing from cracks in the rock. Unlike normal ice, these crystals had an unusual refractive quality, splitting her flashlight beam into prismatic patterns. When she breathed on one crystal, the surface clouded but didn't melt as expected. Curious. Elena took out a small screwdriver from her toolkit and tapped the crystal lightly. The response was immediate and unexpected. A tiny spark flickered within the crystal, accompanied by a soft pop sound. Elena's eyes widened. She quickly took out her spark generator and aimed it at a cluster of crystals, cranking the handle rapidly. The resulting spark jumped to the ice formation, and for a brief moment, a purple-blue flame erupted from the crystal before dying out. Elena gasped, then quickly repeated the experiment with another crystal, this time observing more carefully. The flame wasn't consuming the ice. It seemed to be feeding on something within it, or perhaps utilizing the crystal structure itself in some kind of exothermic reaction. Elena broke off a larger piece of the crystal and carried it back to the main chamber of the cave. "I found something," she announced to the shivering cadets. "I need volcanic rock fragments, as many as you can gather from the cave walls." Despite their confusion, the cadets who could still move began collecting the black rock fragments. Elena arranged them in a small depression in the cave floor, creating a crude fire pit. She placed the ice crystal in the center, surrounded by the volcanic rocks. "Everyone back," she ordered, taking out her spark generator. "I'm not entirely sure what will happen." Elena cranked the handle vigorously, aiming the spark directly at the ice crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the crystal ignited with a whoosh, bursting into a brilliant purple-blue flame that cast eerie shadows throughout the cave. The flame grew, feeding on the crystal, which didn't melt but seemed to slowly diminish as it burned. Heat, blessed, life-saving heat, radiated from the fire pit. The cadets gasped collectively, instinctively moving closer to the warmth. "How?" Em whispered, her glass skin beginning to clear as the frost melted away. "How is ice burning?" "It's not exactly ice," Elena explained, examining the burning crystal closely. "It appears to be some kind of crystalline structure that contains compressed gas or volatile compounds. The magnetic properties of this planet must create conditions where these compounds form naturally within the ice. When ignited, they undergo an exothermic reaction." Verkan, his reptilian metabolism reviving in the heat, nodded slowly. "On my world, we have similar phenomena, crystals that burn, but they are deep underground, formed under tremendous pressure, never at the surface. The extreme cold and magnetic field here must create similar conditions," Elena said. "We need to gather more of these crystals. This one won't last long." The flame indeed burned out after about 15 minutes, leaving behind only a small residue of mineral ash. The temperature in the cave had risen notably, but would quickly drop again without a sustained heat source. "I'll go," Verkan volunteered, his body now moving more fluidly in the temporary warmth. "My species can tolerate lower temperatures better than most of you." Elena nodded. "Take this." She handed him her spark generator. "If you get lost or need emergency heat, use it on a crystal. But be careful. We don't know how stable they are." While Verkan searched for more crystals, Elena organized the remaining cadets, the Euro twins, their multiple limbs now functioning again, helped reinforce the reflective insulation. Kira, still weak but conscious, kept watch at the cave entrance for any signs of danger. Em, her technical expertise intact despite her equipment failure, examined the crystal ash, trying to determine its composition. Verkan returned an hour later with an armful of crystals, his scales frosted, but his movements still strong. "There's a vein of these about 50 meters deeper in the cave system," he reported. "Hundreds of them, growing from the ceiling and walls. Elena carefully arranged another crystal in the fire pit. "We need to establish a burning schedule," she said, igniting the new crystal. 20 minutes of burn, followed by 40 minutes of conservation. That should extend our supply and maintain survivable temperatures. The pattern was established. 20 minutes of blessed warmth from the burning crystals, followed by 40 minutes of huddling together under reflective blankets, preserving the residual heat as the temperature slowly dropped again. During each burning period, teams would venture deeper into the cave to harvest more crystals, building their supply. As the hours passed, the cave became a makeshift command center. Elena's mechanical tools and analog instruments became precious resources. Her hand-cranked radio, though unable to penetrate the magnetic interference to contact the academy, provided a small speaker through which she could amplify sound throughout the cave. Her mechanical clock became their timekeeper, marking the burn cycles with precision. The cadets began to organize themselves into functional teams, the Euro Twins. With their multiple limbs and compound vision that functioned well in low light, became expert crystal harvesters. Verkon, with his cold-resistant physiology, took on the role of gatekeeper, controlling access to the cave and watching for other cadets who might have survived the landing. Once she recovered from her initial shock, proved valuable in analyzing the burning properties of different crystal formations. "The ones with fracture lines inside burn hotter," she reported after several experiments. "We should prioritize those for the coldest periods." Kira, though physically weakened by the cold, possessed a natural sense for detecting vibrations through the ground. She became their early warning system for the magnetic earthquakes that occasionally shook the cave, potentially threatening their shelter. On the third day, though day was a misnomer, on a planet now plunged into a 500-hour night, Verkon returned from his post at the entrance with news. "More survivors," he announced. 3 cadets from the northern landing zone. The newcomers were in terrible condition. A vulnerate named Kells, with severe frostbite on his limbs, and 2 others so weak they could barely speak. Elena immediately ignited a crystal, breaking their careful rationing schedule to provide emergency warmth. "Your equipment?" she asked, as they huddled around the flame. "Destroyed," Kells replied, his voice raspy from the cold. "Like everyone else's. We've been walking for 2 days, following the rock formations. We saw your light from 3 kilometers away." Elena assessed their condition with growing concern. The 2 weaker cadets might recover with warmth and rest, but Kells's frostbite was severe. Without medical intervention, he might lose limbs, assuming his species could even survive such trauma. 20-minute burn cycles, she explained to the newcomers. "We're rationing crystals to maximize our chances until rescue arrives." Kells's eyes narrowed. "Rescue? The Academy won't send anyone until the training period ends. That's 500 hours from deployment. They'll come when they realize the magnetic storm knocked out all our equipment," interjected. "They can't expect us to survive without functioning gear." "Can't they?" Kells laughed bitterly. "This is Kale 7, Deathworld training. Casualties are expected. That's why it's the final test before graduation." The words hung heavy in the air, chilling them more effectively than the dropping temperature as the crystal burned down to ash. Elena checked her mechanical clock. They had used 30 minutes of heat instead of 20. Their careful rationing plan was already compromised. "We stick to the schedule," she said firmly. 20 minutes of burn, 40 minutes of conservation. Everyone shares equally. That's how we survive. As the days stretched into a week, their situation stabilized into a precarious routine. The crystal supply remained adequate thanks to the Euro Twins' harvesting efforts. The cave temperature never rose above freezing, but remained survivable with the regular burn cycles. Verkon continued to bring in occasional survivors. A total of 12 cadets now shared their shelter. But tensions were growing. Kells, his condition worsening despite the warmth, became increasingly bitter. We should burn continuously, he argued during one conservation cycle, his body shivering violently under the reflective blankets. What's the point of saving crystals if we freeze to death anyway? Continuous burning would deplete our supply within 2 days, Elena countered. The 20-minute cycle maintains survivable temperatures while extending our resources. Says the human, Kel spat. Your species evolved on a temperate world. What do you know about true cold? Verkan hissed a warning, moving between Kel's and Elena. She knows enough to have saved all our lives, the reptilian said. Without her discovery of the burning crystals, we would already be dead. The confrontation subsided, but Elena noticed Kel's watching the crystal storage area with increasing frequency. She instructed Verkan to post guards. The Euro twins would take shifts monitoring their precious supply. M approached Elena during the next burn cycle, her glass skin reflecting the purple-blue flames in hypnotic patterns. I've been analyzing the burn rate, she said quietly. I believe we could reduce the cycle to 12 minutes without significantly impacting the temperature maintenance. Elena frowned. We tested 15 minutes 3 days ago. The temperature dropped too rapidly during the conservation phase. That was before we improved the reflective insulation, M countered. And I've identified a more efficient arrangement for the volcanic stones. 12 minutes would extend our supply by nearly 40%. It's too risky, Elena said. If you're wrong, we could lose cadets during the conservation phase. M's crystalline features hardened. You're not the only one with technical expertise, human. My people have been engineering thermal solutions for millennia. Engineering with technology that failed the moment we landed, Elena reminded her. This isn't about expertise, M. It's about proven results. The 20-minute cycle works. It works, but it's inefficient, M insisted. Let me demonstrate. One test cycle at 12 minutes, with my improved arrangement. Elena hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. One test, during my shift, with everyone prepared for emergency measures if the temperature drops too quickly. The test was scheduled for the next burn cycle. M rearranged the volcanic stones in a more concentrated pattern, placing the crystal with the most pronounced internal fractures at the center. Elena watched skeptically as M prepared to ignite the crystal. Everyone stay alert, Elena warned the other cadets. If the temperature drops below survival thresholds, we'll ignite another crystal immediately. M activated the spark generator with a confidence that bordered on smugness. The spark leapt to the crystal, but instead of the controlled burn they had grown accustomed to, the crystal erupted with explosive force. Fragments of burning ice scattered across the cave, one striking M directly in the face. She screamed, her glass skin cracking from the impact and the sudden thermal shock. Chaos erupted as cadets scrambled to extinguish the burning fragments before they could ignite their reflective blankets. Elena rushed to M, who had collapsed, clutching her damaged face. What happened? Elena demanded, examining the injury. A web of cracks spread across M's right cheek, the edges glowing faintly with residual heat from the explosion. I don't know, M gasped. The crystal structure must have been unstable. The concentrated arrangement increased the pressure too quickly. Elena turned to the others. Verkan, check if any fragments ignited secondary fires. Euro twins, gather the scattered crystals. Carefully. Kira, assess structural damage to the cave walls. The immediate crisis was contained, but the incident had significant consequences. M's injury, while not life-threatening, had shaken the group's confidence. The failed experiment had also wasted a valuable crystal and damaged some of their insulation materials. We returned to the 20-minute cycle, Elena announced once order was restored. No more experiments without extensive testing on small samples first. M said nothing. Her damaged face turned away from the others. Elena could sense the glass-skinned cadet's humiliation and anger, emotions that could be as dangerous as the cold in their precarious situation. That night, during Elena's sleep shift, She was awakened by a commotion near the crystal storage area. Grabbing her flashlight, she rushed to investigate and found Verkan restraining Kells, who had a handful of crystals clutched to his chest. "He was trying to steal our supply," Verkan hissed, his powerful reptilian arms locked around the struggling Vulnerid. "Planning to take them and leave," Kells snarled, his frostbitten limbs flailing weakly against Verkan's grip. "The rationing is killing me. My species needs more heat. I can feel my extremities dying." Elena approached carefully. "Kells, we're all suffering, but if you take those crystals, you condemn the rest of us." "I don't care about the rest of you," Kells shouted, his voice echoing through the cave. "The Academy teaches survival at any cost. That's the lesson of Kale 7. "No," Elena said firmly. "The lesson is that we survive together or not at all. In these conditions, no single cadet can make it alone." Kells lunged suddenly, breaking free from Verkan's grip and charging toward Elena with desperate strength. She sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into the cave wall. The impact dislodged ice from the ceiling, which crashed down around them. In the confusion, Kells scrambled toward the cave entrance, still clutching several crystals. Elena pursued, but as they reached the mouth of the cave, a violent tremor shook the ground. Another magnetic earthquake, stronger than the previous ones. Kells lost his footing on the icy ground, tumbling down a slope that had formed outside the cave. Elena watched in horror as he disappeared into a crevasse, taking their stolen crystals with him. His scream echoed briefly, then silence. The earthquake continued, causing rocks to fall around the cave entrance. Elena retreated inside, where the other cadets had awakened and were securing their supplies. "Structural integrity compromised," Kira reported. Her serpentine body pressed against the cave floor, sensing vibrations. "The entrance arch is weakening." As if to confirm her assessment, a large section of rock crashed down, partially blocking the cave mouth. Cold wind howled through the reduced opening, immediately dropping the temperature inside. "Ignite a crystal," Elena ordered, breaking their cycle schedule once again. "We need to assess the damage and make repairs." By the purple-blue light of the burning crystal, they surveyed their situation. The cave entrance was now a narrow gap, barely wide enough for a cadet to squeeze through. More concerning was the network of cracks spreading across the ceiling. The earthquake had destabilized their shelter. "We can't stay here," Elena realized aloud. "The next quake could bring down the entire cave system." "Where can we go?" one of the Euro twins chittered anxiously. "The surface temperatures are unsurvivable for more than a few minutes." Elena unfolded her manual map of Kale 7's surface features, a backup she had printed on waterproof paper before deployment. "There's an ice trench 5 kilometers east," she said, studying the topography. "It's deep enough to provide shelter from the wind, and the walls might contain more of the burning crystals. 5 kilometers in open terrain, in temperatures below 220 degrees Celsius," M said incredulously, speaking for the first time since her injury. "Half of us won't make it." "None of us will make it if the cave collapses," Elena countered. "And the magnetic storms are intensifying. The quakes will get worse." The decision was made more urgent by a series of smaller tremors that dislodged more ceiling fragments. They had perhaps hours before their shelter became a tomb. "We move at the start of the next burn cycle," Elena decided. "Pack only essential survival gear. Each cadet carries a share of the remaining crystals. We'll use 1 crystal to warm us before departure, then move as quickly as possible toward the trench." The preparations were solemn and efficient. Each cadet understood the stakes. They were gambling their lives on reaching the ice trench before their bodies succumbed to the cold. The weaker cadets were paired with stronger ones who could assist them if necessary. Elena performed one final check of her equipment. Her analog thermometer still functioned, though the mercury struggled to register the extreme cold. Her mechanical compass would guide them east. Her reflective blankets, wrapped around each cadet, would provide minimal protection from the deadly chill. The final crystal, in their original cave, burned down to ash. Elena ignited another, allowing everyone a full 20 minutes to absorb its warmth before the journey. "Stay together," she instructed, as they prepared to leave. "Move quickly but carefully. Conserve energy. If anyone falls behind—" She hesitated, then continued firmly. "We cannot stop. The group's survival depends on reaching the trench." One by one, they squeezed through the narrowed cave entrance into the full fury of Kale 7's long night. The cold hit them like a physical blow, instantly penetrating their layers of protection. The sky above was a void of absolute darkness, the only illumination coming from the aurora-like effects of the magnetic storms that rippled across the horizon. Elena took the lead, compass in hand, setting a pace that balanced speed with endurance. Verkan brought up the rear, ensuring no one fell behind unnoticed. Between them stretched a line of cadets, each fighting their own battle against the killing cold. The first kilometer was manageable, their bodies still retaining heat from the final crystal burn. By the second kilometer, Elena could hear labored breathing and occasional stumbles behind her. The third kilometer brought the first casualty. One of the weaker cadets from the northern landing zone collapsed, his biological functions simply shutting down in the extreme cold. "We can't leave him," his partner protested as the others moved past. "You stay. You both die," Verkan hissed from the rear. "Honor his sacrifice by surviving." They pressed on, now 4 kilometers from the cave, 1 from their destination. Elena's extremities had gone numb despite her thermal gloves and boots. Each breath was agony as the super-cooled air froze the moisture in her lungs. Behind her, the line of cadets had thinned, some fallen, others barely moving forward through sheer will. The ice trench appeared suddenly, a dark gash in the white landscape. Elena nearly sobbed with relief as she skidded down its slope, out of the howling wind for the first time in hours. The others followed, those still able helping their weakened companions navigate the descent. At the bottom of the trench, protected from the direct blast of the frigid air, Elena quickly counted survivors. 8 cadets had made it, including herself, Verkan, M, 1 Eurotwin, Kira, and 3 others. At least 4 had been lost on the journey. "Crystals," Elena gasped, her voice barely functioning in the cold. "Everyone who carried crystals, bring them here." They had salvaged 12 crystals from their original cache. Elena arranged them on the trench floor, using the last of her strength to create a proper fire pit from ice fragments. The first crystal ignited with a familiar whoosh, its purple-blue flame a beacon of hope in the darkness of the trench. The survivors huddled around it, trembling violently as sensation painfully returned to frozen extremities. "The walls," Verkan noticed, pointing to the trench's ice surfaces. "More crystals." Indeed, the trench walls were lined with the same formations they had discovered in the cave. Their new shelter not only protected them from the wind, but provided an abundant supply of burning crystals. As warmth slowly returned to her body, Elena assessed their situation. They had survived the journey, found shelter and fuel, but their condition was deteriorating. Frostbite affected most of the cadets to some degree. Dehydration was becoming a serious concern, as was the risk of starvation if their ordeal extended much longer. "How many hours since deployment?" Em asked, her damaged face partially hidden behind a reflective blanket. Elena checked her mechanical clock. 172, she replied, roughly 1/3 of the way through the long night. "No one has ever survived a full long night without functioning equipment," one of the remaining cadets said hopelessly. "Not even the instructors attempt it." "We've survived this far," Elena reminded them. "And we have a resource they didn't account for." She gestured to the burning crystal. "We maintain the schedule. 20 minutes of burn, 40 minutes of conservation. We build our strength and continue harvesting crystals." Days blurred together in the perpetual darkness of Kale 7's long night. The trench became their world, a narrow slash of survivable space in an otherwise deadly environment. They established a new command center, improved their insulation using ice blocks and reflective materials, and created a more efficient system for harvesting and storing crystals. Elena's leadership was now unquestioned. The failed experiment and the journey to the trench had proven her judgment sound. Even M, her face healing, but permanently marked with crystalline scars, deferred to Elena's decisions on burn cycles and resource allocation. On what Elena's clock marked as the 10th day since deployment, Kira detected unusual vibrations through the trench floor. "Not an earthquake," the Serpentine cadet reported. "Regular, mechanical." Elena climbed to the edge of the trench, peering across the dark landscape. In the distance, a faint light moved systematically back and forth, sweeping the terrain. "Search pattern," she realized. "Rescue craft." The group erupted in excited chaos, cadets scrambling to gather their emergency signals, light reflectors, color flares, anything that might catch the attention of the distant vessel. "It's too far," Verkin said, assessing the distance with his keen reptilian vision. "At least 7 kilometers. They'll never see our signals from here." Elena thought quickly. "The crystals," she said. "If we burn several at once, the light might be visible." "That would deplete our emergency supply," M cautioned. "If they don't see us." "Then we continue as before," Elena decided. "But this is our best chance." They gathered 5 crystals, nearly half their reserve, and arranged them in a tight cluster at the trench's edge. Elena positioned cadets with reflective blankets to amplify and direct the light toward the search vessel. "On my mark," she said, spark generator in hand. 3, 2, 1. The crystals ignited simultaneously, creating a column of purple-blue flame that shot upward into the dark sky. The heat was intense, forcing the cadets to back away despite their need for warmth. Elena watched anxiously as the distant searchlight continued its pattern, showing no sign of detecting their signal. "Again," she ordered as the flames began to die down. "Prepare the next batch." They burned 3 more crystals, their reserves now dangerously low. Still, the search vessel showed no indication of changing course. "We can't use any more," M said, her voice hollow with disappointment. "We need the remaining crystals to survive until they search this sector." Elena knew she was right, but the thought of returning to their tenuous existence in the trench while rescue was so tantalizingly close was almost unbearable. She stared at the distant light, willing it to turn toward them. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the search pattern changed. The light stopped its methodical sweep and began moving directly toward the trench. "They saw us," Elena breathed. "They're coming." The minutes stretched agonizingly as the light grew larger, eventually resolving into the distinct shape of an Academy rescue shuttle. Its landing lights illuminated the area around the trench, banishing the darkness that had been their constant companion for 10 days. "Remain in position," a voice boomed from the shuttle's external speakers. "Prepare for medical evacuation and temperature stabilization." The shuttle landed near the trench edge, its ramp extending toward them. Academy medical personnel in specialized environmental suits rushed out, carrying thermal stabilizers and emergency medical equipment. Elena watched as her fellow cadets were helped aboard, M with her scarred face, Verkan maintaining his dignified bearing despite his exhaustion, the remaining Euro twin chittering weakly to the medical staff, Kira's serpentine form being carefully warmed in a specialized carrier. A medical officer approached Elena, scanner in hand. "Cadet Navarro? You're the last one. Your life signs are critically low. Let's get you aboard immediately." Elena nodded, but paused at the trench edge, looking back at their makeshift home of the past week. The final crystal still burned, its purple-blue flame flickering defiantly against the overwhelming cold and darkness. "Wait," she said to the officer. "There's something I need to preserve." Ignoring the officer's protests about her condition, Elena carefully extracted a small, unburned crystal from their remaining supply and wrapped it in a specimen container from her analog kit. "A sample," she explained, finally allowing herself to be led toward the shuttle. "The crystal structures that burn, they could revolutionize emergency survival protocols." Aboard the shuttle, warmth enveloped her for the first time in 10 days. The medical staff worked efficiently, treating frostbite, dehydration, and exposure. Elena found herself next to M, whose glass skin was being treated with some kind of regenerative compound. "We made it," M said quietly. "Because of you." Elena shook her head. "Because we worked together. Because we adapted when technology failed us." The Academy officer in charge of the rescue operation approached them as the shuttle lifted off, leaving the deadly surface of KL-7 behind. "Extraordinary survival," he said, reviewing data on a tablet. "When the magnetic storm knocked out all electronic equipment, we assumed casualties would be total. No cadet group has ever survived equipment failure during the long night." "We had something better than equipment," Elena replied, holding up the specimen container with its crystal. "When magnetic storms destroy technology, ask a human, what can burn?" The officer took the container, examining the crystal with professional curiosity. "This will be studied extensively. Your discovery may become standard protocol for future KL-7 deployments." As the shuttle ascended through the amber-violet clouds, Elena looked down at the dark surface of KL-7. Somewhere below, their final crystal still burned in the trench, a tiny, purple-blue flame in an ocean of darkness and cold, marking the place where they had refused to surrender to the impossible. The long night would continue for hundreds more hours, but they would not be there to endure it. They had survived the unsurvivable, not through advanced technology or specialized biology, but through observation, adaptation, and the most fundamental survival skill of all, finding warmth in the coldest place imaginable. In the Academy infirmary days later, Elena was surprised to receive visitors, her fellow survivors, recovered enough to walk, but still bearing the marks of their ordeal. Verkon's scales had permanently darkened from frostbite. The Euro-twin had lost 2 of its smaller appendages. Kira moved more slowly. Her serpentine reflexes diminished. M's face bore a network of silvery scars, where the crystal had damaged her glass skin. "The Academy is implementing a new training protocol," Verkon announced without preamble, "based on your crystal discovery." "They're calling it the Navarro Protocol," M added, a hint of her old competitiveness in her voice, though now tempered with respect. "All cadets will receive analog survival training in addition to technological solutions." Elena smiled, feeling a complex mixture of pride and humility. "It wasn't just my discovery," she said. "It was all of us, working together." "But it was your approach that made the difference," Kira said softly. "While we relied on technology that failed, you observed, experimented, adapted." "The most important lesson of KL-7, the Euro-twin chittered. "The universe doesn't care about our technology or our species. It only rewards those who can adapt to its harshest realities." As her fellow cadets departed, Elena looked out the infirmary window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there. KL-7 continued its orbit, the long night gradually giving way to dawn, as it had for millennia before humans or any other species had visited its frozen surface. The burning crystals had saved them, but the real discovery had been more fundamental, that survival often depended not on the most advanced technology, but on the ability to observe the unexpected, to find resources where none seemed to exist, and to maintain hope in the face of overwhelming odds. In the endless cold of space, that lesson would serve them far better than any thermal core or self-assembling habitat. It was the lesson of KL-7, written not in academy textbooks, but in the purple-blue flames of impossibly burning ice.